The sun was just starting to warm the pavement when she pulled into the gravel lot. The building was low and plain, made of cinder blocks painted a faded gray. A simple sign, Oak Ridge Shooting Range, hung by the door. She sat in her car for a full minute, her hands tight on the steering wheel. This was it. The first real step. Inside, the smell hit her first. It was sharp, a mix of something metallic and something burnt, like old fireworks. Underneath that was the smell of strong coffee, and the oil people used to clean their guns. The room was loud, but not with voices. It was the sound of sharp cracks from the firing lanes, one after another, and the clatter of empty brass shells hitting the concrete floor. A few men stood behind a long glass counter, talking and laughing about a football game. They wore 2 shirts from shooting competitions. They glanced at her when the bell on the door chimed, and looked back at each other, their conversation barely pausing. She walked to the counter, her old range bag feeling suddenly very cheap and small. "I'd like a lane, please." For an hour. The man behind the counter, his beard speckled with gray, nodded without looking up from his phone. Safety briefings on the screen. Rules are on the wall. You bring your own eyes and ears? She nodded, pulling out her own safety glasses and ear protection. Yeah, I have my own. He took her money and pointed a thumb towards the lanes. Number 7. Her lane was at the very end. To get there, she had to walk past everyone else. Most were men, a few of them older, their movements slow and practiced. But a group in the middle lanes was different. They were younger, loud. Their gear looked expensive, their bags covered in patches and stickers. And they were good. She could see the tight, perfect clusters of holes in their paper targets far down the lane. One of them, a tall man with a confident smile, seemed to be the leader. He was showing another guy a trick with a magazine. His hands moving fast and smooth dot, she set her bag down on the bench at lane 7. It was quieter here, cooler. She unzipped her bag and took out her pistol. It was a simple, basic model, reliable but nothing special. The finish was worn in places from practice. As she started to load the magazine, her fingers, stiff with nervousness, slipped. A single heavy bullet dropped from her hand, hit the concrete bench with a loud clink, and rolled onto the floor. It wasn't that loud, not really. But it felt like a gong had been struck. The laughter from the middle lanes stopped for a second. She bent quickly to pick it up, her face hot. A voice, clear and meant to be heard, cut through the noise of the gunfire. "Hey, careful there. Those things are expensive." It was the tall man. He wasn't looking at her, but he was talking to his friends about her. "You gotta watch the new ones. All thumbs." One of his friends chuckled. "Looks like she's better suited for a library. Or a coffee shop." She kept her head down, pretending to be very interested in her magazine. She could feel every pair of eyes on her back. The heat in her face spread down her neck. She finally got the magazine loaded and slid it into the pistol with a solid click. The sound, familiar and solid, helped a little. She racked the slide, chambering around, and took a deep breath. She fixed her eyes on the target, a simple black silhouette 25 yards away. She raised the pistol, finding her stance. Feet shoulder width, arms straight but not locked. She let half her breath out and held it, focusing on the front sight. The world narrowed to that one small metal post. She squeezed the trigger. The sound was huge, a violent crack that jolted through her arms, even with the ear protection. The gun kicked in her hands. Downrange, a single hole appeared on the target, high and to the right. Not a great shot. She fired again. And again. 5 shots total. When she hit the button to bring the target back, she saw the grouping. 3 holes were in a decent cluster near the center. One was the high shot. One was low. It was okay. It was a start. But as the paper target came closer, flapping on its carrier, she heard another comment from the middle lane. The tall man was watching her now, a faint smile on his face. He spoke to his friend, but his voice carried. See that? Flinching. Anticipating the bang. Classic beginner mistake. She's fighting the gun. He shook his head, turning back to his own lane. The range isn't a photo shoot, sweetheart. It takes more than just showing up. That was the one that stuck. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. It was the way he said, sweetheart, like it was a joke. Like she was a child, playing with something she didn't understand. It made her feel small and foolish, standing there in her lane with her average target. She didn't cry. She didn't pack up and leave. She just stood there, staring at the holes in the paper. The embarrassment began to cool and harden in her stomach, turning into something else. Something solid. She looked down at her pistol, then back at the target. She thought about the tall man's perfect groupings, his easy confidence, the way everyone listened to him. Quietly, she sent the target back down the lane. She ejected the empty magazine, loaded 5 more rounds, and took her stance again. This time, when she raised the pistol, her hands were perfectly still. The laughter from the other lane was just noise now. Background static. She focused on the front sight, on her breathing, on the smooth, steady pressure of her finger on the trigger. She didn't know it then, but the seed was already planted. The laughter had watered it. And now, in the quiet of Lane 7, it began to put down roots. The very next morning, she was back. The Oak Ridge Range didn't open until 9, but her car was in the lot at 8:45. She sat, sipping water, watching the manager unlock the doors. She was the first one inside. The same smells, the same sounds. But today, it was different. Today, she had a plan. The laughter from yesterday was like a recording playing in her head. But instead of making her want to hide, it made her want to move. She paid for her lane, the same man at the counter giving her the same nod. She went to Lane 7 again, the last one on the end. It was her lane now. Her practice wasn't just about shooting bullets anymore. It was a science project, and she was the only student. She started with the boring stuff, the stuff no one in the loud group would ever talk about. Stance. She spent a whole hour just standing. Feet planted, knees slightly bent, finding the balance where the recoil wouldn't knock her back. She'd close her eyes, get into position, and then open them to check in the slight reflection of the lane's safety glass. Then the grip. How her hands fit together on the pistol, like 2 pieces of a puzzle. Not too tight, not too loose. She practiced without any ammunition at all, just dry firing at the wall over and over, listening for the clean click of the trigger and watching to see if the front sight wobbled when it happened. It always did, at first. A tiny, betraying jerk. She found her problems quickly. She was flinching, just like the tall man had said. Her body was bracing for the loud bang before it even happened, and that tiny fear was enough to pull her shot off target. It was a deep habit, wired into her nerves. So she started a game. She would load her magazine with a mix of real bullets and empty shells, called snap caps. She wouldn't know which was which when she pulled the trigger. When she hit a snap cap and the gun just went click instead of bang, she could see the huge, embarrassing flinch her body made. It was humbling. But she did it again and again until her body started to learn. The bang was just a sound. The kick was just a push. She had to be still. She had to be calm. She became a ghost at the range. The regulars got used to the quiet woman at Lane 7. She didn't chat. She didn't look at their gear. She just worked. Her hands grew tougher. A small blister formed on her thumb, broke, and healed into a callus. Her shoulders ached in the evening. She spent money on ammunition, not on fancy gear. Her pistol was clean, well-oiled, and utterly familiar, but the range could only teach her so much. At home, in the quiet of her apartment, her real training happened. She pushed the coffee table against the wall and lay on the floor, doing exercises to make her core stronger, to make her arms steadier. She'd hold a book out at arm's length, just to build the stamina to hold the pistol perfectly still for minutes at a time. And she read. She fell into deep holes on the internet, reading forums with names like precision shooting and the accurate life. The conversations were full of terms she didn't understand. MOA, ballistic coefficient, parallax. The profile pictures were almost always men, often with serious faces and expensive rifles. She never posted. She just read, late into the night, piecing the puzzle together. One night, she found a post by an older shooter. His username was simple. His advice was clear, without any bragging. He talked about the inner game, about how shooting was 90% mental once you had the basics down. She gathered her courage and sent him a private message. It was just a few lines, asking about how to stop anticipating the recoil. To her surprise, he replied, not with a quick tip, but with a question. Tell me about your routine. Every detail. And so she did. It turned into a conversation. He became a voice in her ear, a guide. He wasn't a coach she paid. He was just a man who loved the craft and saw someone who truly wanted to learn. They started doing video calls. He'd have her set up her laptop at the edge of the firing lane. Show me your stance, he'd say, his face a kindly pixelated square on her screen. Now breathe. Forget I'm here. Show me 5 shots. He taught her that the target wasn't her enemy. The noise wasn't her enemy. Even the recoil wasn't her enemy. The enemy was distraction. The enemy was that little voice of doubt that sounded an awful lot like laughter. Your mind has to be quieter than the gun, he told her. The shot should almost surprise you when it happens. Meanwhile, life at the range went on. The tall man, the club champion, was always there. He'd shoot his impressive rounds, his targets a beautiful display of precision. Sometimes he'd hold little clinics for his friends, showing off a new technique. His record score, 598 out of 600, was on a plaque by the entrance. People would pat him on the back. He was the king of this small, loud world. She saw it all from her lane at the end. She heard the cheers for his best targets. It didn't make her angry anymore. It just made her curious. She started to study him, not with jealousy, but like a scientist. She saw the way he stood, so relaxed. She saw the rhythm of his shooting, like a slow, steady heartbeat. She stopped seeing a bully and started seeing a technician. A very good one. She began to understand what that score, 598, really meant. It meant near perfection. It was a mountain, yes, but mountains could be climbed. You just needed a map and the strength to take the first step. One afternoon, after a particularly good session where all her shots felt easy and true, she packed her bag. As she walked out, the club champion and his friends were gathered around the counter, talking loudly about the upcoming state qualifier. It's in our house, boys, he said, smiling. A home field advantage. Just another trophy for the case. She walked past them, out into the afternoon sun. The door shut behind her, cutting off the sound of their voices. In the quiet of the parking lot, she felt a new feeling. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was quieter than that. It was a simple, solid knowledge. She knew her stance. She knew her grip. She knew her breath. The qualifier was just another target, and she was learning how to be still. The morning of the qualifier, the air in the Oak Ridge Range felt thick and electric, like before a thunderstorm. The usual weekend crowd was gone. replaced by a different kind of shooter. Men and women with serious faces, rolling hard plastic cases that held precision rifles and pistols that looked like they belonged in a science lab. Everyone moved with a quiet purpose. This was the real thing. She signed in at a registration table, not the main counter. The woman handed her a number on a sticker, 42. She pressed it onto the back of her old range bag. Looking around, she saw the club champion. He wore a crisp shooting jersey with sponsors' logos, laughing easily with other competitors who seemed to know him. His number, 7, was pinned to his back. He looked like he owned the place. The qualifier was simple but brutal. 60 shots. A perfect score was 600. You had to finish in the top 10 to earn a spot at the state championship. The firing line was full, 20 lanes each occupied. The commands from the range officer were sharp and clear. Load. Make ready. The line is hot. You may commence firing. A symphony of cracks filled the room, a steady, deafening rhythm. She took her first shot, and it was good, solid. The next one was too. But on the third, she rushed it. The hole appeared just outside the center ring. A flush of heat went up her neck. Don't chase it, she heard her online mentor's voice in her head. Asterisk 1 shot at a time. It's gone. Breathe. Asterisk, she fell into her routine. Shoot. Breathe. Lower the pistol. Check the target through her spotting scope. The black circle seemed to waver in the heat. She forced herself to slow down, to make every movement deliberate. The world shrank to the feel of the grip in her hand, the tiny front sight, the slow squeeze of her finger. Down the line, the club champion was a machine. His shooting had a rhythm to it. Bang, bang. Bang, each shot perfectly timed, no hesitation. People watching would nod appreciatively. He was putting on a clinic. Halfway through, they called a break to change targets. Her arms were trembling, not from fear, but from the sustained focus. She drank some water, her hands unsteady on the bottle. She didn't look at her running score. She knew it was okay, but not great. She just stretched her fingers and waited. The second half began. The pressure was a physical weight now. Every shot felt heavier. A young man 2 lanes over let out a frustrated curse after a bad shot, throwing his hands up. The distraction broke her concentration for a second. Her next shot landed wide, a clear mistake. Panic, cold and sharp, started to bubble in her chest. She could feel the chance slipping away. She closed her eyes behind her safety glasses. She thought of lane 7. The quiet, the emptiness, the smell of old coffee and gunpowder. She thought of the dry fire practice in her living room. This was just another session. Just her and the target. She opened her eyes, exhaled slowly, and began again. The final 10 shots were a blur of pure focus. She wasn't thinking about qualifying anymore. She wasn't thinking about the other shooters, or the champion, or the laughter from months ago. She was just following the steps. Stance, grip, sight picture, breath control, trigger press, follow through, over and over. Cease fire. Clear all firearms. The range officer's voice boomed. It was over. Her arms dropped to her sides, the pistol safe on the bench. A deep exhaustion settled into her bones. She was suddenly aware of the noise again, the chatter, the clattering of gear. She packed her things slowly, methodically. Scores were being calculated. A crowd gathered around the electronic scoreboard that had been set up near the entrance. She hung back, not wanting to push through. She could hear the reactions. Wow, look at that. 595. He's on fire today. That's got to be the top score. Incredible. She knew who they were talking about. The club champion had posted a 595. A murmur of respect went through the crowd. That was a winning score. That was a statement. One by one, other scores flashed up. 587, 589, 582. The competition had been tough. Her throat felt tight. She edged closer, searching for number 42. There it was. Hash 42, 592. She stared at it. She must have read it wrong. She blinked. The numbers stayed the same. 5 minus 9 minus 2. A rush of something disbelief, shock, a jolt of pure energy shot through her. It was the 10th highest score. She had qualified. By 2 points. A hand clapped down on her shoulder, hard. She jumped. It was the club champion. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was tall, looming over her. "Hey, not bad out there," he said, his voice loud enough for others to hear. Really pulled it together at the end. He leaned in a little, his tone dropping to something more conversational, just for her. "Look, that was a good run. But this?" He gestured vaguely at the busy range. "This is club stuff. The state stage. It's a whole other world. The lights, the crowd, the best shooters from everywhere. The pressure crushes people who aren't ready for it." He gave her shoulder a final, patronizing pat. "Just don't get in over your head, kid. Be happy you made it this far." He walked away, back to his friends who were slapping him on the back, already talking about the state match, as if his victory was certain. The people near her glanced at her, some with pity, some with indifference. The shock of her score was already fading, replaced by his words. She stood frozen, the number 592 still glowing on the screen. The joy she'd felt for that 1 second was gone, frozen solid by his warning. He had reframed everything. Her achievement wasn't a triumph. It was a fluke, a setup for a bigger public failure. She picked up her bag, the strap rough in her hand. She walked out of the range, the afternoon sun bright and harsh. In her car, she didn't start the engine right away. She just sat there, watching the other competitors leave, talking and laughing. His words played on a loop in her mind. Asterisk, the pressure crushes people. For the first time, she let herself really think about what was next. Not just another practice, but a stadium. Strangers watching. The best in the state. A cold knot of doubt tightened in her stomach. What if he was right? What if she had just been lucky today? What if the state match was where she would finally truly fail, in front of everyone? She looked down at her hands. They were steady. She thought of the target, the pure focus, the quiet place she found in lane 7. That was real. The 592 on the board was real. His words were just noise. They were just another form of the laughter from her first day, trying to throw her off. She started the car. The engine rumbled to life. The knot of doubt was still there, a heavy stone in her gut. But underneath it, something else was stirring. A quiet, stubborn resolve. He thought she was just happy to be there. He thought the pressure would break her. She pulled out of the gravel lot, the dust kicking up behind her. She had a month. 1 month to get ready. She wasn't going to the state championship just to participate. She was going to prove, to herself and to everyone in that room, that the quiet woman at lane 7 knew exactly what she was doing. The state championship was nothing like Oak Ridge. It was held in a vast convention center, where the air was cool and smelled like floor polish and popcorn. Bright, hot lights hung from a high ceiling, beating down on a line of pristine shooting lanes. Instead of the echo of a dozen shots, there was a low, tense hum from a crowd seated in bleachers. People murmured. Cameras on long arms whirred above the shooters. It felt like being on stage now. She walked onto the concrete floor, her small range bag feeling even smaller. The other competitors moved with a calm, professional energy. They wore custom ear protection, had coaches whispering to them, and their equipment looked like it cost more than her car. For a moment, the noise and the lights were too much. She felt dizzy, like an imposter who had wandered into the wrong building. The club champion's words echoed. Asterisk. The pressure crushes people. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She found her assigned lane, number 22. It was in the middle of everything. She carefully laid out her things, her simple pistol, her 3 magazines, her bottle of water. Her hands were cold. She looked down the line and saw him. The club champion was at lane 10 holding court. A few local reporters were talking to him, and he was smiling for a photographer. He looked comfortable, like he was in his living room. The range officer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, clean and formal. The commands began. Shooters to the line. You may load and make ready. The sound of dozens of slides being racked, loading firearms, was a sharp metallic chorus. She followed the steps, her movements automatic from practice. The pistol felt familiar in her hand, a small anchor in the middle of the storm. The line is hot. You may commence fire in 3, 2, 1. Begin. The first shot from the line was deafening, a rolling wave of sound that filled the huge space and bounced off the walls. It wasn't the isolated cracks of Oak Ridge. It was a continuous, thunderous roar. Her first instinct was to flinch, to rush. She took a breath that shuddered in her chest and raised her pistol. Her first shot was terrible. It was barely on the paper, a wild flyer. Panic, sharp and immediate, shot through her veins. This was it. This was the crushing pressure. She could almost hear the laughter. She lowered the gun, her fingers trembling. She closed her eyes. She couldn't think about the crowd, the cameras, the champion, or the reporters. She had to find a smaller place. She thought of her laptop screen, her mentor's calm, pixelated face. She heard his voice, not as a memory, but as if he were right there. Asterisk, the target isn't your enemy. The noise is just noise. Find your bubble. Asterisk, she opened her eyes. She didn't look at the bleachers. She didn't look at lane 10. She looked only at her target, 25 yards away. She imagined building a wall of thick, silent glass around her lane. The crowd's murmur became a distant buzz, like insects outside a window. The booming gunshots became a rhythm, a heartbeat she could tune out. She started again. This time, she didn't fight the pressure. She let it exist, outside her bubble. Shot 2 was better. Shot 3 landed in the black circle. Her breathing began to slow, to match the pace of her shooting. She entered a kind of trance. Load, raise, breathe, sight, squeeze, lower. The world was her lane, her pistol, her target. Nothing else. Time became strange. It felt like both an instant and an eternity. She was aware of her body, the solid stance of her feet, the steady burn in her arms, the smooth press of her finger, but not of her thoughts. Her mind was quiet, finally quiet. During the break, she sat on her stool, sipping water. She didn't check scores. She didn't talk to anyone. She just kept her eyes on her gear, preserving the bubble. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the club champion. He was done. He was pulling off his ear protection, a look of supreme satisfaction on his face. People were already shaking his hand. He had shot a .597, a near-perfect score, one of the best of the day. The trophy seemed already etched with his name. He caught her looking and gave her a small, almost sympathetic nod. It wasn't mean. It was the look of a king acknowledging a peasant. It said, asterisk, you see? This is my world. Then he turned away, his attention back to his admirers. The final relay was called. Her bubble had held, but now a new thought crept in. A .597. That was a mountain. Could she even come close? For a second, the doubt tried to get in. She stood up, shook out her arms, and pushed it away. Her job wasn't to beat his score. Her job was to shoot her next shot. Just the next one. She stepped back to the line. The loudspeaker crackled. Commence fire. The roar started again. But this time, she didn't hear it. She was deep inside the bubble. Her movements were fluid, effortless. Each shot felt clean, true. There was no past, no future. No champion, no crowd, no old laughter. There was only the perfect, repeating present moment. The sight picture, the gentle squeeze, the quiet surprise of the shot breaking. When the final cease fire. Command boomed. It felt like waking up. The sound rushed back in the crowd, clapping, people talking, the shuffling of feet. Her arms ached with a deep, good tiredness. She safely cleared her pistol, her hands now perfectly steady. She packed her things slowly, carefully, not looking at the scoreboard. The announcer was talking, building suspense for the final results. She felt calm, empty. She had done it. She had shot on the state stage and hadn't broken. She had stayed in her bubble. For her, that was already a victory. She zipped up her bag and finally allowed herself to look toward the giant screen where the scores would flash. The crowd was quiet, waiting. The club champion stood with his friends near the podium, a small, confident smile on his face. He had already won. Everyone knew it. She was just glad the noise was over. She was ready to go home, back to the quiet of Lane 7. She had faced the pressure, and it hadn't crushed her. That was enough. Or so she thought. The announcer's voice crackled with false excitement. All right, folks, let's see those final standings. On the big screen, now. A hush fell over the crowd. All eyes, including hers, lifted to the giant digital board. It was a long list, scrolling from the bottom. The lower scores came up first. 580s, 585s, a few 590s. The crowd clapped politely. Her heart was a dull thud in her ears. She watched, not really expecting to see her number yet. Then, the top 10 appeared. 10th place, 593. 9th, 594. The clapping grew louder. She watched the numbers climb, each one feeling like a step closer to an inevitable conclusion. 3rd place flashed up, 596. A great score. A wave of applause. Then, 2nd place. #10, 597. A huge, roaring cheer exploded from one section of the bleachers. The Oak Ridge group was on their feet, whooping and hollering. The club champion smiled, a wide, victorious smile, and raised a hand to acknowledge them. He turned, already taking a step toward the podium where the 2nd place medal waited. He had shot a 597. For a moment, everyone assumed that was the highest score. The champion had won. The announcer's voice cut through the noise, confused. Hold on, folks. Hold on. We have a correction on the board. The cheering died down into a puzzled murmur. The club champion stopped, his smile freezing, and turned back to the screen. The number for 2nd place, his 597, blinked once, and then slid down one position. A new number appeared at the very top of the list. Asterisk, asterisk, number 1, number 22, 599. Asterisk, asterisk. For a full 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. It was so quiet, she could hear the hum of the lights above. Then, the silence broke into a tsunami of sound gasps, shouts, a buzz of pure disbelief. People were squinting, pointing, asking each other, "Who is number 22? She stood by her lane, frozen. Her brain couldn't process the number. 599. It was a score from another planet. It was 1 point away from absolute perfection. It was a number that broke the state record, the record that had belonged to the man now standing frozen near the podium. Her eyes found her number on her bag. 22. Lane 22. Her lane. A jolt, like electricity, shot from her feet to the top of her head. It wasn't joy. Not yet. It was pure, overwhelming shock. Her hands went numb. She couldn't breathe. The announcer, flustered, called out, "Shooter number 22, to the podium, please." Number 22. People were looking around, searching. An official in a blazer was walking quickly down the line of lanes, his eyes scanning competitor numbers. He stopped in front of her. "Are you 22? He asked, his voice loud over the buzz. She could only nod. "Come with me, please." "You're the champion." The walk to the podium was the longest walk of her life. The crowd's eyes felt like physical weight on her skin. She passed the Oak Ridge section. The faces there were blank with shock. The club champion was staring at her, his expression unreadable, a mix of disbelief, dawning understanding, and something that looked like a profound personal rearrangement of the world. He wasn't smiling anymore. She stepped up onto the highest platform. The gold medal was placed around her neck. It was heavy, shockingly cold. Someone put a large trophy in her hands. Flashbulbs popped, making her blink. The announcer shoved a microphone toward her face. An incredible performance. A new state record. What was going through your mind up there? How did you do it? The noise of the crowd swelled, waiting for her answer. She looked out at the sea of faces. She saw the Oak Ridge group, silent now. She saw the club champion, his arms crossed, watching her from the floor. She thought of the first day, the dropped bullet, the laughter that had chased her out the door. She lifted the microphone. Her voice, when it came out, was quieter than she expected, but clear. It didn't shake. A sound of laughter, she said, can be the best motivation. She didn't look at anyone specific. She didn't need to. She paused, then added, "You just have to learn to listen past it. To listen to the shot instead." She didn't say anything else. She didn't talk about the lonely hours, the online mentor, the dry fire practice, the self-doubt. The simple words were enough. She lowered the microphone dot the following week. She went back to Oak Ridge. Everything was the same, the smell, the sounds, the same man at the counter. But something was different. The silence when she walked in was respectful, not dismissive. The regulars nodded at her. The old plaque with the club champion's record of 598 was still there, but it looked different now, like a page from an old history book. She went to lane 7. She set up her bag, the same old bag, though now a state champion's gold medal was buried somewhere deep inside it. As she was loading her magazine, a movement caught her eye. A young woman, maybe in her late teens, was standing a few feet away, clutching a new, basic pistol case. She looked nervous, exactly like she herself had felt months ago. The girl spoke, her voice hesitant. "Excuse me? I saw you at the state match. On the video online." The girl took a breath. "I just started. Could you? Would you mind telling me what I'm doing wrong?" She looked at the girl's eager, anxious face. She saw herself. She put down her magazine and smiled, a real, warm smile. "Sure," she said. "First thing, ignore all the noise." She gestured at the range around them. "All of it. The good and the bad. Just listen to your shot." She motioned the girl into the lane next to her. "Let's start with your stance. Feet here like this." The girl watched, her eyes wide with concentration dot, and in lane 7, under the same fluorescent lights where it had all begun, the quiet champion began to teach.